So today I'm going to show you how to break down a beef tenderloin. You want to get those beef tenderloins out of the vacuum package and rinse them off, pat them dry, and then get them onto your cutting board. What we have here, the industry term is called a pismo. It's P-S-M-O, pismo, and that stands for peeled side meat on. So if you just get this from the cow, there would be a big fat cap on here. So that's been peeled off. And then the side meat is actually, I'll turn it so it's closer to you, is this piece right here. It's called the chain is what we refer to it as, but this is the side meat. So pismo, peeled side meat on. So that's the kind of the standard when it comes to beef tenderloins if you're buying them and breaking down yourself, okay? So the first thing we need to do is get this cleaned up. And there's a few different ways. One of the easiest ways is to use your hand and actually start pulling apart and separating this collagen and elastin. And you can get a little bit, you get your knife in there to help set it. But what you're going to find is that you can use your hand and peel a lot of this fat right off. Right? In fact, it should go all the way over to that side meat, and you're going to find that natural seam that separates the tenderloin from that chain or that side meat. And hopefully see that right there, okay? So you get that set, then use your boning knife to separate this out the rest of the way. This is considered waste, although I wouldn't throw this away. This makes excellent grind meat to turn into high-end hamburgers. Or if you really are glutton for punishment, you could go in and you could separate the pieces of meat from the fat, but it's a lot more, it's a lot easier just to take this and turn it into grind. If I was doing that, what I would do is I'd cut it down, make it easier to work with. And then depending on what size grinder you have, you might want to take and split this as well. So take your knife and run it down the middle to split it, and that makes it a little bit easier to work with and run it through your grinder. Okay, so we take the chain off. Okay. Now we're going to clean up the rest of the tenderloin here, and you can see all I'm doing is I'm just working with this fat and just trimming up this extra fat. Now this works very similar to what you did when you were breaking down the pork loin. We're going to go up underneath. Go up underneath that silver skin, kind of lift up a little bit, slide it through, a little bit of an upward motion, and just do a sawing motion back and forth. If it doesn't go all the way, that's fine. Just go as far as it will go. I'm pretty fortunate there, and you can see by that upward motion, I leave most of that meat actually on. Then I turn it around, hold on to the fat, and then do the same thing the other way as far as I can. See, when I first start, sometimes you pull a little bit of that. It does happen, but you want to try to leave as much of that beef on there. Now, this stuff here, this silver skin, make sure you keep it separate from your chain, especially if you're going to turn the chain into ground beef. I wouldn't grind this up. It's just fat. It's just silver skin. So once you weigh it for your waste, you just throw this away. There's not much you can do with that. Okay? So I'm going to go in and continue the process here as much as I can until I get up to this end here, which we call the head. And the head, you can see, it's just another part. There's actually another natural seam running right here. And once we get to that part, we have to make a decision on what we're going to do with our steaks. And there's a couple different ways you can go about doing that. So let me finish this up. So I'm going to turn this. It's easier for me to work like so. And again, go up underneath, work your way across, go back the other way, and pulling that silver skin off again. Then you can kind of go in and trim up the other way too. Okay. I'm not worried about these little bitty guys because just like we talked about with the the pork loin, if I try to get these, I'm probably going to pull a lot more meat than I am just the fat. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So now I've come to the point where I have to make my decision. I've got this fat here that's up by the head. Now, depending on what I want to do with this, we'll make a decision on how I trim this up. If I want to leave this all together, I would go up underneath and I would try to keep this as one piece. Then what would happen is when I start cutting my steaks, these would be fillets, but they'd be wider, and we refer to those as head steaks. So a head steak is great if somebody orders their filet mignon medium well or well done. You're not getting this really big, thick steak that you have to cook, so hard and it ends up becoming dry. You get a thinner one that's wider that still gives you the weight, and you can get that medium well or that well done that somebody might order. You leave the mediums and below for the center part of your filet mignons that you're going to cut. So that's one option. The other option, what we're going to do today is we're actually going to separate the head, and then that's going to give us a specially cut called the Chateaubriand. And then we're going to cut some smaller medallions called tournedos. We'll then cut our fillets, and then we'll finish up with some more tournedos for this, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm looking for that natural seam that comes from here. And you'll see, especially underneath, there's this nice piece of fat here that gives you a good indicator as far as separation. So you can take that, start the separation, and you just work your knife down like so. And you separate that out, okay? So this right here is the Chateaubriand. So Chateaubriand, we would clean this up just like we did the rest, and this you would leave typically by itself. And this is kind of a little old school, but then you would sear this and roast it to the temperature, and then this would be like a filet mignon for two people. The other thing some people do is they'll cut the ends off to flatten it out and then cut it in the center to make two more fillets is another option. But this is kind of nice, especially with Mother's Day coming up. You want to do a nice little Chateaubriand for mom and dad or whatever for dinner. You've got an option there for that. So you take this, get it cleaned up, make sure you remove all the fat from it, and then you've got that Chateaubriand ready to go. Now, the rest, we've still got to clean up. You see, we've got our fat here. So we'll get rid of the silver skin, working our way down and through. It's nice as it does make it easier. The other way, you can get a few more steaks typically, but it's a little bit more time consuming and a little more challenging to get the fat off of there because you're having to work up and in between for it. That's why I kind of like this way, especially when you're new to cleaning beef tenderloins. It's just a little bit easier for you when you're still learning. And again, I remember when we practiced before, you were working on that pork loin that cost you, what, less than $2 a pound? This is almost $10 a pound. That's why I wanted you to practice on the cheaper stuff first. So this is looking pretty good. Again, I like to have this little line. I'm not worried about it because I'm probably going to pull more than what I need. Same with these little guys here. Next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip this around. And I've got the meat and fat combination up here. This is what was up against the actual spine and the ribs and such. So that's why it has a little bit different look to it. Typically what I do for this is I just take my knife and I just go right up underneath and do a nice even cut and just get rid of some of that bigger pieces of fat that come from it. This is great also for grinding, so leave this for working with your burgers and stuff. And then you can see if you have big pockets of fat, like this one right here, I'm gonna get rid of that. And then down here on the tail, I'll get rid of this pocket of fat as well. And again, all that stuff, because it has some nice meat in it, is gonna be good to run through your grinder for burgers. All right, I got a little bit more fat here that I want to take care of. So I work my way up under here. This is part of where we were at in that corner. So I'm going to clean that up. Once I get this extra fat cleaned up, then I'm ready to start cutting my product. All right. Again, underside especially, a little bit of fat is okay because again, we don't want to remove too much of the actual meat itself. And I got a little bit of fat on this side I want to take care of real quick because that is a bigger piece. I can clean that up. Okay. And now I've got my cleaned tenderloin. So now from here, I'm ready to cut my steaks. So we've already got the first cut, the Chateaubriand, right? Again, just needs to be cleaned up. Now we're going to start cutting the tournedos and our fillets. So you're going to use your chef's knife. I'm using my scimitar. So this end piece, typically, we can just do a little small guy here, okay? And what we'll do with this is give it a little push. It gives us a nice little medallion, okay? This is one of those tournedos. And then you usually go in and you can do a couple of tournedos here. These are what I want you to use for your minute steak Dijonnaise. Okay? These are going to be your minute steak Dijonnaise. So you can just kind of give it a little press. You can see just a hand press is all you need. And then you'll take and cover this with the Dijon and the onions. And then you'll cook these up, and they will only take a few minutes, why they call them minute steaks. So you've got, these. You can probably get 3 or 4. I'll take one more off of this here to give me some nice tournedos off the head side of it. Okay, you see, it looks really, really nice there. Now I'm getting into the middle part of the body where I'm getting my fillets. Fillets, depends on what you're going with. The typical, usually 6, 8, or 10 ounces. I mean, 12 ounces, that's kind of crazy getting in here. But if you're getting into a 6, you're getting about like so. 8 gives you about like this. So again, depending on what you want to do, these are what you're going to turn into your pepper steak. Well, just a couple of them. You don't have to do all of them. This is what you're going to turn into your pepper steak. So I'm going to cut a 6-ounce fillet. It's kind of a nice, and again, you cut it, boom, there's your filet mignon. Okay, you guys are going to take and put peppercorns, push the peppercorns on one side and put the peppercorns onto the other side. And then that's what you're going to use for your pepper steak. But again, you just go in, do your cuts, and you get these really nice filet mignons. Now, you might see them, bacon wrapped, and that's real easy. All you gotta do, if you're doing this, take some raw bacon, hold on to it, wrap the bacon around, then use a toothpick to hold them together, and then you've got bacon wrapped fillets. So it looks like I can get another one out of here. Okay. Now, the problem is to get a 6-ounce now, you've got to do something like this. And that looks really weird, right? It looks just really strange because it looks like it's a leaning tower of steak, right? So these I turn into tournedos as well. Now, some people do these and they butterfly them, which to me, that's sacrilege when it comes to working with beef tenderloin. Because if somebody wants a well done or a medium well, I'm going to cut those head steaks like I talked about earlier. I don't want to come in here and do something like this, and even worse, there's some people that will take this and that's what they'll serve you as a fillet for your mid-rare fillet. Why are you giving me a butterflied steak when I want this? I want that whole steak. I don't want you to cut it beforehand and butterfly it, but there are some places that do those things. So watch out. They're trying to get an extra one out of there. Okay. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to then turn these guys again into the tournedos. Okay. And again, you have some different options here when it comes to the tournedos. That one fell apart, so I'm just going to throw that in for the grinding. That's fine. And I've got a little bit here. This is really neat, and even some of these tournedos, if you wanted to take this bad boy and slice it up, and now you've got meat for some high-end stir fry or for a high-end goulash or something along those lines. And so you've got this really nice saute meat that you could do. You could even take some of these little guys and slice them up as well, add these into the setup. Or you can take this beef and throw it in with the rest of your grinding stuff and then grind it all and make some really great filet burgers, I've had them before. Oh my gosh, they're delicious. And they're so tender because of what we're using for that. So that is how you break down your beef tenderloin. You're going to get probably a little bit of that stew meat. You're going to get your tournedos. You're going to get your Chateaubriand, get that cleaned up. And then you're going to get your filet mignon. Plus, you've got meat for grinding. You've got the chain for grinding as well that you can make burgers and stuff with. So there's a lot that you can get with it. But note the stuff that's the chain and the scraps, those are all waste. So those you'll consider waste, even though you can use it for something else. This other stuff does have a different value though. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how to break down a beef tenderloin.